Hey, welcome to the next episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series, the show where we aim to inspire people to create and generate new and exciting ideas, as well as inspire a little bit of self-belief and positivity in the community. This is the Bionicle Inspiration Series. So, this episode is all about MOCs with stands. If you take a look at some of the MOCs that we've seen in more recent and past episodes of the Bionicle Inspiration Series, a lot of them have actually had some pretty awesome stands on them. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what that can do for a MOC, because honestly, in my opinion, it can make a MOC look so much cooler. And I think I've got four really... I spoiled that there was going to be a bonus MOC. We got four really cool stands on these awesome MOCs. And not only are the stands cool, but the MOCs that are accompanying them are also pretty awesome. So there's a lot that we can look at in this episode. So let's begin and take a look at some of these MOCs with stands. So the first MOC that we've got is by Muffin Tower and is called Nuala Mage of Earth and Priestess to the Great Beings. Very awesome MOC. This is a very Bionicle heavy stand and kind of Bionicle heavy MOC overall in this entire diorama that we're looking at here. A lot of the other ones that we'll see in the episodes and a lot more of the stands that you see nowadays are very system heavy, almost entirely system heavy. And this is almost purely Bionicle. It's got a bit of system at the bottom, of course, there, but I think it's very interesting to kind of compare the two. So we take a look at this fantastic tree design. Has a few plant pieces mixed in there, some of the system plant pieces and a few of the vines and things like that. But for the most part, this is mainly made out of various random green pieces. You got some Rakshi feet, you got some Vaki eyes, you got the Borok shields, you got a Liwa Nuva mask, all sorts of random pieces thrown in there. But the way that they're kind of laid out and everything, and sort of the way that they're interconnected with all of those different brown pieces to make up the trunk of that tree, it's a really effective design. And you know, often I've seen a few dioramas in the past where they use some more kind of Bionicle heavy parts to make a tree or to make some dioramas and stuff, and it can be a little bit more difficult to understand what's going on, but I think this MOC very effectively communicates this tree design here. It's really well done. We actually take a look at the tree trunk here. It uses a bunch of these brown tubes and various other brown pieces, and it's creating this really effective sort of, trunk design. Kind of just the way that all the pieces there have been sort of interconnected. It's just sort of creating this really sturdy looking design that really effectively conveys a tree trunk. I think that's really creative and really clever, and simply doing that using some of those wire beam tube pieces there and a few other things like some of those Technic panels and stuff like that. It's actually a really effective way to make a tree design. I would definitely recommend maybe playing with that, whether you're playing with more of a focus on Technic and Bionicle parts, or even if you're using system pieces, some flex tube and some other tubing parts, you could easily make a really effective, nice-looking tree design with those pieces. So I think that's some very clever parts play there. I really like what Muffin Toe has done. Speaking of clever parts play, I really like the tire cauldron that he's done here, simply using a tire piece there to make a little cauldron. It's very effective, very clever, and then just sort of pouring in all those trans pieces in there creates a nice-looking sort of bubbling potion cauldron effect. I really like it. One of the other things I really like here is we take a look at the landscape. There's a whole bunch of system on here. All these nice little details like some of the various plants and stems and mushrooms and little studs on the floor for rocks and stuff. It's very clever and very effective. But the little bits of Bionicle that have been used here on the floor, I think are really awesome. You know, you got some of these Borok arm pieces here that kind of almost kind of look a little bit like some sort of, dead twigs that are on the floor or something like that. Or it's just kind of a little bit more of like curved landscape or something. Those have been blended in very nicely, kind of hiding them a little bit with some of those plant pieces. This is very nicely done. But then we take a look at this rock back here, using some of these Borok Krana there, and a few other pieces to create a really effective rock design that uses a bunch of Bionicle pieces. Really cool, isn't it? I really like that design. Very effectively done. Great job, Muffin Tower. There's a lot to love about this. And then, of course, we've got this awesome little Turaga here that they use some interesting connection points. There's a decent amount of posability on this Turaga here, but I really think the definite standout on this is, of course, the overall stand. So, yeah, really great job playing around with Bionicle pieces here to make a really effective stand that gives so much more personality to the MOC, in my opinion. If this MOC was just on its own, it would look cool, but kind of putting it in this sort of deep jungle setting, putting a cauldron in front of it, and just the pose that it's got, like it's kind of praying or something, it's really awesome. It's really cool. I like that a lot. It's creating a story. It's creating character. It's awesome. So fantastic job, Muffin Tower. Let's move on to the next MOC, which is by Aaron Van Cleve and is called Turaga Riccio Atomen. something like that. So this is a bit more of a system-heavy diorama. In fact, this is almost entirely made up of system pieces, at least the little vignette under it, which is pretty cool to see. Some really interesting part usages here. We take a look at this funky sort of pillar design here off on the edge of the diorama. We've got some of those missile shooter pieces here, and they've got a sort of funky looking texture on them, and the way that they've kind of implemented them like that creates this sort of more kind of like Aztec decoration around it. It's very nicely done, kind of a great way to play around with that really unique part. Looks really cool. And so this mock uses a whole bunch of different plant pieces, and as a system builder who builds quite heavily with system and does that quite a fair bit, I cannot recommend plant pieces enough. They're so much fun to play with, and it's something that can allow you to kind of add a lot more depth into a mock. You know, when you're playing around with all these different plant pieces, you can add in vines, you can add in sort of overgrowth, all sorts of stuff. And it's a really simple and easy tool to make a mock look really, really good. So if you're planning on building a little simple system stand for your mock, definitely be sure to pick up some plant pieces. You can easily get some of those in any of your pick-a-brick stores if you're near a Lego store, or you can order them online for super, super cheap. And yeah, just kind of play around with them, put them around in some interesting ways and things like that. There's not really any kind of rhyme or reason or specific techniques that you definitely need to look into if you're placing your plant pieces. Because if you look at the diorama itself, it would look really good without the plant pieces, but it's the plant pieces that actually add so much charm to the mock. That's what gives it life, all that overgrowth and all the roots and different stems and everything. It's what gives it so much character and creates a much more of a story. It sets this character in a really interesting setting. You start to think of a story. You sort of see that he's kind of this village elder who lives out in the middle of nowhere in this sort of remote Aztec city. Maybe he's a sort of wizard or shaman. And honestly, it's the plants that are conveying that story to me. You know, obviously the look of the character does as well, but you could easily put this character by the sea and you would get a very, very different look and character and feel and atmosphere for him. Whereas adding this stand in here is communicating so much more and so interesting. I really like that. So pick up some plant pieces and play around with your stands. But maybe you have played around with plant pieces and you're like, Ben, I just don't know what to do. Well, check out this Behind the Build episode that I posted, in which I do actually talk a little bit about how to work with landscapes and plants and things like that. There'll be a link to that in the description. So if you need a little bit of pointers and help there, I've got you covered. But let's take a look at this Turaga guy here, because he's pretty awesome and has some awesome stuff going on. We've got a bit of system being used here, sort of on kind of on his belt and stuff. He's got all these interesting knickknacks and different things, for his little wizard spells and stuff. He's got a little frog trapped in a little canister. He's got a map. He's got a microscope, all sorts of stuff like that. And those little additions, it says a lot about the character. It's a lot of fun little details. It does a lot. You know, if that wasn't on the mock, it would still be a really awesome mock, but it would lose a lot of charm. So I think that's really interesting, isn't it? That a lot of the details add a lot of charm to a mock. And I think that's kind of what making a stand on a mock is to add more detail to it and to give it more charm, to give it more life, to give it more character. So it's something to consider. One fantastic technique that I've seen before used in system stuff, but not so much on Bionicle stuff. If you take a look at this sort of cape that he's got over here, all of those Keytorange teeth pieces there sort of flowing over his shoulder, you can kind of see it if you kind of look towards the back. All of those are connected with a net piece. So just your typical Lego net. As you can see at the back there, if you simply attach any kind of piece through the net and then put a stud on the other side, you can actually basically attach them to the net, and then you get this sort of flowing, fluid design. And so all of those pieces, you could easily take that off and they'd still be attached to the net. You can kind of shake it about and stuff. So you're able to get this sort of almost brick-built cloth effect. So it's really, really cool. I've seen it being used before on system stuff for like kind of broken apart walls and things like that. I'll throw up a few pictures of some of the ways I've seen it being used in system stuff. But be sure to kind of play around with that with Bionicle, because this is pretty much the first Bionicle mock I've seen that uses that interesting net design, and it's a fantastic technique. It's not too difficult to recreate. It's a little bit finicky just because it moves around and stuff, but it's, once you've built it, it's not that difficult to manage or anything. So yeah, maybe play around with that, see what you can do, because you can kind of create some really, really interesting kind of cloth-like textures and things with your system pieces. So play around with that. You never know what you might learn. Also, something else I like here are all these chains that are attached to his arms and also to his head there, and then of course they just sort of disappear, but obviously there's some little bit of Photoshop going on there. But I like that. Maybe you're building something and you're also a bit of a Photoshop whiz. And so you sort of decide to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to edit around this picture a little bit. And there's sort of things I want to add, but maybe you can change the color on Photoshop, or maybe you can just edit little bits out. And again, you're creating more of a story. You're creating more of a character that, you couldn't necessarily do that in the real world. But if you take a photo and edit it, you can add so much more. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So fantastic, very system-heavy mock, but it still teaches us a lot about Bionicle. So let's take a look at this next mock, which is by Anthony Wilson and is called the Herald. So something that's cool about this stand here is that he's kind of taking notes from the actual character and putting it into the stand itself. Like little things like some of the color scheme is being conveyed on the stand as well. You got little bits of light bluish gray and silver and gold, and even little hints of the sort of trans blue and the dark bluish grey there are also used on the mock itself. So you've kind of got that nice visual unity there, as well as just sort of some of the shapes of those Bionicle weapons in the back there are very similar to the shapes that are used on the actual figure himself. So it's cool to see that sort of visual unity between the two. And then it's even cooler to see the fact that this mock actually has some lights in the bottom there, which is sort of adding some dynamic lighting onto the actual Bionicle figure here. And that is super, super cool. So that's another thing you can consider. If you're making a stand, maybe you can buy some of the official LEGO lights, or go to a hobby store and buy some, some LED lights that are pretty cheap and easy to use. Just get some batteries or plug it into the wall or whatever, and you can create some cool lighting effects that'll enhance your mock in even cooler ways. So maybe that's something to consider. Or you do like this mock actually uses here and light up the eyes of the mock too with, I assume, more sort of third-party lighting and stuff. That, in my opinion, is pretty freaking rad. I really, really like that. So yeah, maybe your stand's going to implement some lights and stuff. Who knows? I also think there's this really interesting story being told with this that's very different to the stories that we saw before. This kind of floating island effect and this sort of large expanse of land under him. There's kind of this weird sense of intrigue going on, and this character just sort of has this mono eye. It's almost very angel-like. It's very different, and the color scheme is very, kind of heavenly almost. So there's a really interesting sense of intrigue going on. It kind of makes you question what's going on. There's not really a clear story being told, but that's a good thing, I think, because it's leaving a little bit of space for you to kind of go like, oh, what's going on here? And you kind of form the story for yourself. I might see one story being told with this mock, and you might see a completely different story. But that's kind of the point, and that's kind of the cool thing. So, maybe you do want to tell a story with the stand and the mock itself, but you can kind of leave a little bit of that up to interpretation. You can kind of put little hints and things in there, or just kind of have this really interesting, funky-looking design and let people form their own story as a result. I think that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. Quickly touching upon the mock, like I said, really funky-looking head design there, very system-heavy. It lights up, looks really cool. Really, really awesome wing design here, using some of these Kupaka G2 Bionicle blades there. They're really effective to use as wing designs there. I think it's pretty cool, actually. It looks awesome. And then he's got this cool little waist cape design here, using some of these Technic panels, sort of angling the smaller ones and the larger ones like that. It's cool. It just creates this sort of, nice little waist cape design. It's just really effective. I like that a lot. Does a lot for the character. It's cool. So nice work, Anthony Wilson. Here is that bonus mock that I was talking about before. This is a mock by Patrick Biggs and is called Poppet Primus Suit Edition. So just quickly, this mock was made for a 2018 Secret Santa gifting thingamajig, and he was recreating a mock made by Cameron, which was also called Poppet. This is a mock made in 2008. So they're very different to Cameron's sort of traditional building style that you see nowadays. Obviously a much older mock from him. So Patrick has reimagined that in a very, very cool looking way. It's awesome. I love what I love what Patrick has done here. But I also like what Cameron had done before. But Patrick has reimagined it in a fantastic way. So what I like about this stand is it's super, super simple. But that's totally a good thing. Maybe you're not a whiz with system pieces. Maybe you don't have access to a huge amount. We take a look at what's on here. It's literally just some larger base plates, some smaller looking Lego bricks there, some 2x4s, some 2x2s, some studs, and a whole bunch of 1x2 tiles, and a few other plates and things and bricks to kind of connect them up at the back there. It's not a lot of pieces. I know it probably sounded like a lot when I was talking about it, but when you actually look at it, it's not a lot. And especially too, pretty much every single piece that you're seeing there, you could easily get off a pick a brick wall at your local Lego store. Or you could easily get all of those pieces in probably like one Lego set, You take a look at your collection, you probably already have all those pieces. So this isn't using a huge amount of different stuff or hard to come by stuff, and yet it's still doing a lot for the mock. We see some cool visual unity, having this sort of little kind of like maybe like stream of water or a little bit of sort of like crystals on the floor there, all those no, that is not trans yellow. That is trans sort of yellowish green or whatever you want to call it. Thank you, MC Logo Boy. That is a little bit of unity there with sort of those little trans yellowish green highlights throughout this mock as well. So you got some nice visual unity there. And it kind of just looks like some cool alien landscape that kind of flows into the sort of story that this mock is telling. And it's doing a lot. It's enhancing the mock a lot more. It would look cool on its own, but looks even cooler with a stand. And so, yeah, see what I mean? Like, it's not too difficult to obtain those pieces. So you don't have to go hand bone, and you don't have to be super amazing at building system and stuff. Adding in a stand can still do a lot, even if it's a little bit more simplistic. And I think this mock is a fantastic example of that. So quickly, let's talk about what's going on in this awesome mock by Patrick. Not talking about the stand this time, just talking about the mock. Really, really awesome head design, using those dishes and things there to kind of form a sort of eye and then attaching them through that Nuva shoulder there. Really effective design. Love how that cone is kind of going towards the back there of the head. It's a really unique head design. It looks awesome. These shoulders are super cool too, adding in those masks there on the sort of awesome shoulder pads and then having those sort of axle pin pieces there sticking out of the top there. It's really, really cool. Looks really nice. But probably my favorite part of this is the arm design, using those Star Wars Ultra Build sort of shin armor pieces there on the arms and then kind of connecting everything else around them. It's just a really, really awesome, sleek, beautiful design and a great use of those pieces. It does a lot for the mock and looks super cool. So a lot to love about Patrick's mock here, and a lot to love about all of these 4 mocks that we saw in this episode. So take a look around, look at your system pieces, look at your Bionicle pieces, because like we saw from both of these mocks, it doesn't matter if you're using system or Bionicle, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, as Michael Jackson once said, you can use either one and still make a really effective stand and tell an awesome story that can perfectly complement your mock. I think that's pretty cool. So something to think about, something to play around with in the future. This was a mock episode. This was a Bionicle Inspiration Series episode on mocks with stands. We'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to submit some of your own mocks to the show, you of course can. The only way to do so is through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. Just send me some pictures of the mock that you want to have on the episode, and I will put it on in the future. Also, be sure to take a look at the links in the description to all the mocks that you saw in today's episode, because all of the people who have been featured in this episode are fantastic builders. Give them some love, because they very much deserve it. Also, while you're there, you can check out some of my own social media links, as well as check out my Patreon page. Would very much appreciate that if you did. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Happy building. Hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, guys.